You ask questions, so maybe they are scared that you would take their names as well.
अरे, so I should not ask the questions. ये तो
I know that is. I'm just saying that this might be a reason why many people don't attend.
oh, but then when I ask questions, it is for their own benefit, right? I mean,
Yes, ma'am, but they
they are
might
able to
probably not.
answer it
Yes,
as
ma'am,
soon
but
as they are not able
ma'am,
to.
but even in other classes, when the professors start interacting with the students, many students start leaving. Like,
Okay.
I don't know how it is.
Okay, so you tell them that it will be a quiet class. I will not ask any questions. फिर चलेगा.
Ma'am, but then it won't be like good for the people who like to interact in class, right?
Right, so but then I will ask only 6 names, right? Udita, Ashi, Vishantan, Agrim, Devpriya, Ratnesh. That's it.
Sure, ma'am. That.
Yes, I think that.
That may work, right? I will not ask anybody else. No Gopika, no nobody else. Rishita. Okay, let's start the class. So we were discussing about genes and non-coding DNA. So the question is, why to study genes? So again, I have asked you a question, but I think to you people I can ask.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
So to learn more about the particular organism and just about the dogma of life, and we could also look at, let's say, there's something wrong with a particular organism. So what might have went wrong, and where?
Very good.
Yes, ma'am. Like we are finding about genes, like the Mendel's experiments, and from there, we find that there are things in the cells, and that can be the region of different kinds of traits. And
Okay. Anybody else? So why should we study genes?
to know about what a specific gene does, like what are the properties of we get because of the genes, and what.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good.
To understand about the similarities and differences among the species.
And and okay.
Ma'am, in order to understand the various diseases that
Mhm.
could be caused by the mutations in the genes.
Mm. That is why we need to study genes. But then the next question is gene cloning.
Yeah, ma'am. One thing more, like there may be industrial use of like the insulin is produced in human, and then when we find the gene in human, that gene in human, and that then can be used for the industrial production.
So I'll put it in this to know about the functionality and use it for various purposes, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
So now the question is why to clone a gene? If you want to study the gene, okay, there are multiple reasons, but then the question is why should we clone a gene? Why gene?
Because we need many copies, right? Like only one copy or two, three copies won't suffice.
And
So that we can conduct more experiments using the more copies. and maybe we will know about some mutations that take place in the cloning process.
Here I'm slightly modifying your sentence. So this is to learn and then specifically mutate the gene.
Ma'am, also sometimes we have to like add a gene to an organism, so we need like same copy, like we need a copies of the gene to add to different cells.
Term for that is heterologous host. So you can supply the gene in a host which does not contain that gene. So in that case, students, the host is called as heterologous host. And
Can you please explain heterologous host once again?
say it again.
Can you please explain the heterologous host once again?
Right, heterologous host is again the host which does not contain that gene. So for example, let's say insulin is native to eukaryotes, right? But when we express it in E. coli, E. coli is a heterologous host, because in this case the insulin gene is not native to E. coli, something like this. Even if we express a gene from a gram-positive bacteria, let us say Corynebacteria or Rhodococcus, and if we express it in Corynebacteria itself, right? So you can clone a gene and then express it in the same host. When you express it in the same host, then it will result in more copies in the same host, because the host will have its own native copy and then you are supplying in extra copies. So that is like when you are doing it in native host. So this is called as homologous host. But when you take that gene, even if it's from gram positive bacteria or eukaryote, and you express it in E. coli, so then this gene is not native to E. coli, and therefore E. coli is considered as a heterologous host. Likewise, if we express a gene of E. coli in Rhodococcus or in Corynebacteria, then in that case again the other one will be called as a heterologous host. Is it clear, Agrim?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So we can, so when we clone a gene, so by gene cloning, what's the meaning of cloning? What's a clone?
Producing exactly same thing.
Exact. So when we say clone, that means it is exact replica. So when we do gene cloning, we do cloning of a gene for multiple purposes. Many a times you do not want to determine the whole genome sequence, right? You are interested in just studying the sequence of one particular gene. So in that case also you can do gene cloning and then sequence just the gene, right? Just the gene. So that is another application. You the other is like, yes, you can have more copies and then you can express it for therapeutic protein production. You can express it for bioremediation. You can express it for supplying certain pathways. So for example, you can perform metabolic engineering experiments, right? Where for example you can introduce a gene which is not native to the host in the chromosome. So one is like you can supply the gene in heterologous host for just for increasing the copies, which the real term that is used is gene dosage. And then you can also supply the gene for metabolic engineering purposes. For example, the gene for malic enzyme was introduced in Simomonas mobilis, which does not contain this gene, and this results in malic acid production, something like this. So you can clone the gene and then express it in a host for just increasing the copies, which is gene dosage, or for metabolic engineering experiments where you can manipulate the biochemical pathway. You can clone the gene for specifically mutating the gene, because performing mutagenesis while the gene is cloned in a specific vector is easy. Now, what is vector? We are going to discuss it in the later classes. But then this mutagenesis also we will be discussing in the later classes. So how can we specifically, for example, enhance the thermostability or enhance the substrate specificity, right? So in such cases also gene cloning is required. So then the next question is how to obtain a gene. How to obtain a gene. So the question is, the genes are present in the genomic DNA, chromosomal DNA, or in the plasmid DNA, right? So then the question is, how can we obtain a gene? So by this, what I mean is like how to isolate just the gene and then use it for cloning.
So, sir, ma'am, first of all, what we will do that we will recognize the gene, then only we will, like using messenger RNA.
So Ratnesh is saying that you need to recognize the gene. That means identify the gene, right? Identify
Yes,
the gene and what did you say?
I just said that.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else would like to try? How can we obtain a gene, class? You can make a guess. It's okay. Don't worry. Can you hear me, students?
We could isolate the DNA
Yes,
and then
ma'am.
try to separate the different genes.
Separate the different genes.
Ma'am, as we know that like restriction enzymes are used for fi- for extracting specific genes, and
We can't separate the genes, but we can definitely like make a sort of a comprehensive list of the code. We can definitely get to know the code of the
The
DNA.
coding sequences, right?
Yes.
Okay. So most likely you people have not studied this, right?
No, ma'am.
Okay, don't worry. So the methods vary depending upon whether the isolation of a gene is from a prokaryote or from a eukaryote. The methods will also vary depending upon whether the sequence information is available or not, right? So first, whether it's a prokaryote or eukaryote, and second, whether sequenced strain or it is sequenced. Okay, so let us first understand the differences between prokaryotes and eukaryotes in terms of isolation of gene. So when we talk about class prokaryotes, so in prokaryotes you have one gene and one protein usually, right? One gene will actually lead to transcription of one messenger RNA that will lead to formation of one protein. Everybody agrees with this or no?
yes, ma'am.
In prokaryotes class, most of the DNA is gene rich, so it contains genes, and one gene usually results in one protein. But this part you need to hear me carefully. In eukaryotes, the situation is not the same. In eukaryotes, you can have one gene and you can have many proteins. We discussed this briefly in one of the lectures when we were discussing the, right? Right. So in eukaryotes, one gene can result in actually many proteins, and these many proteins are because of alternate splicing, where you have multiple exons. You remember that exon, and then you have intron, and then you have exon, and then you have intron.
Yes, ma'am.
Join in various combinations, resulting in different types of messenger RNA. So what happens is that from one gene, a pre-messenger RNA is formed, and this pre-messenger RNA can be spliced differently to form different messenger RNAs. And from these messenger RNAs, you can have different proteins. The other techniques, the other method includes post-translational modifications, which can include, for example, glycosylation, hydroxylation, etc. Multiple, right? Phosphorylation. So they all can result in modification of the proteins. You can
Ma'am,
also have, yes.
Can you talk about like what is like overlapping genes, like
Yes.
overlapping genes? What is?
Overlapping genes, yes. So overlapping genes is a situation where, one second, I'll explain you. So the other method is ribosome frame shifting. Overlapping genes is a situation where, for example, you have ATG. So class ATG is the initiation codon, okay? And then you have a sequence like this, long sequence where N can be anything, A, T, G or C. And then again you have an ATG. Right, so this is the situation where in the same gene you can have two initiation codons. So this is what is called as an overlapping gene. Overlapping gene, often people say that overlapping gene is overlapping genes means the overlap can result in two different proteins, right? And this overlap can be in terms of like the way the way I explained you, that you have ATG, NNN, and then in another situation TGA, TAA. So these are like stop codons, and then you have again another initiation codon. So there is no transcriptional terminator in between. So I think Ratnesh, let us not complicate the things. So but I guess overall it is clear. We will discuss this in the later classes when I will tell you people like what is transcriptional terminator and what can happen when there is no transcriptional terminator and two genes are translationally fused. But for now, I think if the class understands this much, that overlap can result in two different proteins, because you can have in the same frame, you can have two ATGs, two initiation codons. Ribosome frame shifting is a situation when the ribosome binds at a different place, which results in the shift in the entire reading frame. So entire reading frame gets shifted by, for example, one nucleotide. So that can also result in a different kind of protein. So the point that I'm trying to make over here by explaining you that in prokaryotes, one gene is responsible for coding for one protein, whereas in eukaryotes, one gene can make multiple proteins. So now the question is, when we want to isolate the gene from a prokaryote, then what should be the DNA? And what should be the source when we want to isolate the gene from a eukaryote? Is the question clear? People there?
Yes, ma'am. Can you please explain? Ask the question again.
The gene from a prokaryote, letting the gene from a prokaryote. If this is the experiment that you want to isolate the gene from a prokaryote, then what you can do is you can simply use the genomic DNA as the starting material. Correct? Why? Because right?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Because in case of prokaryotes, it's the DNA and one gene is making one protein. But when you want to isolate the gene from a eukaryote, right? You want to isolate a gene from a eukaryote, then what should be the starting material? Can we use genomic DNA? Yes or no?
Ma'am, we have
Start
to
with the
use that.
chromosome.
Can we use genomic DNA, Dev Priya?
But
No,
but what else do we have? Like then
That's what I'm
we have
asking.
only the genomic DNA.
You have only the genomic DNA, that is true. But if we use the genomic DNA, then the point is the gene cloning experiment will not be successful. Why? Because when we clone the gene, when we clone the DNA from the genomic DNA of a eukaryote class, this genomic DNA will have intronic and exonic regions.
Ma'am,
Yes.
ma'am, can we use
Yes.
mRNA and then use like reverse transcription or something?
Yes. So in this case class, if we use, so that's the point I'm trying to make. Um, if we use the genomic DNA class, so in this case, the DNA that is cloned, for example, in E. coli. So because you are expressing it in a heterologous host. So in this case, if you are cloning it in E. coli, then splicing cannot take place because the splicing machinery is absent in prokaryotes. Right. So this takes place only and only in eukaryotes. So introns and exons, they all would be there in the genomic DNA. And when you will clone the gene and when you will try to express the gene, it will not give you any expression. It will not give you any protein. Is this making sense to
Yes, ma'am.
everyone? Agrim Dev Priya?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So therefore, what we do is that we cannot use genomic DNA. You prepare the messenger RNA from the genomic DNA. From the genomic DNA, you prepare the messenger RNA, and from the messenger RNA, using the enzyme reverse transcriptase, you don't have to worry about the enzymes. Enzymes I will be teaching you in the later classes, but just the concept that genomic DNA cannot be used for eukaryotes. Remember that because it contains exonic and intronic regions, and if you clone it, you will not have any expression. So in this case, in a eukaryotic system, you need to obtain messenger RNA, not pre-messenger RNA. Pre-messenger RNA will have introns and exons both. Once the introns are removed, exons are joined together, then you get the messenger RNA, which can be converted with the help of the enzyme reverse transcriptase into cDNA. So this DNA is called copy DNA or complementary DNA. So in this case, this cDNA is actually used for cloning. So when you use the cDNA, you will exactly get the expression of the gene. So that is the major difference class when we try to obtain a gene from a prokaryote versus a eukaryote. From a prokaryote, straight away go for genomic DNA, clone it. For a eukaryote, you need to obtain the messenger RNA, convert it into cDNA, and then clone.
So, ma'am,
Now,
in eukaryotes, we don't even use, even we have to use like a restriction enzyme. We don't need that.
Ma'am, how do we select the mRNA?
okay, so to select the mRNA, there are multiple ways. One is that I'm explaining you in a second. So what we discussed so far was about prokaryotes and eukaryotes, and now the question is the type of approach that you will be using would vary depending upon whether the strain that you are using, whether it's a prokaryote or eukaryote, whether it is sequenced or not sequenced, right? Case So class, in case the strain is sequenced, so that means you have the sequence information, right? So if the sequence information is there, the method is pretty straightforward, because you can, like Ashi, you are asking like how to identify which one is the cDNA. So if the strain is sequenced, right? So then what we can do is the whole sequence will be available at the databases. For example, NCBI database is there are gene bank is there are TIGR database is there, lots of databases are there. So you can actually retrieve the sequence information, and for example you are interested in obtaining the gene for, let's say, glutathione transferase, so you can just search the gene in the sequence in the database for glutathione transferase, and then you can actually design, you can use a method which is called as PCR. Design PCR primers, amplify the gene by polymerase chain reaction, and then you can get the gene. Right, Ashi? But we are going to discuss this method in a little more detail. This is only to tell you the type of approaches would vary depending upon whether the strain, whether you have the sequence information or you do not have the sequence. Have the sequence information, the approach is pretty straightforward. Now the question is, when we do not know the sequence, then in that case, how to go about it? So class, when the sequence information is not available, then the only approach is to use restriction enzymes. And restriction enzymes, they are also called as I'll be explaining you how we can use restriction enzymes for retrieving the sequence from a prokaryote or from a eukaryote, even if the sequence information is not there. So restriction enzymes are restriction endonucleases. So nucleases are the enzymes which cut nucleic acids, right? And endo and exo. So there are two types of nucleases, endonucleases and exonucleases, right? So endonucleases are the one which cut internal to the sequence, right? This is the sequence for a restriction enzyme. And this sequence is present internal to the sequence. You have ends, and then you have the sequence. So then this enzyme will recognize and will cleave this sequence, and this is internal to the sequence. So therefore this is called as an endonuclease, right? Exonucleases are the ones which cut from the end. So for example, if this is the 5' end, and let's say if this is the 3' end, then in this case, when we talk about exonucleases, exonucleases can cut from the ends. Exonucleases can be of varied types. You can have an exonuclease which cuts from 5' to 3' end, or you can have an exonuclease which cuts from 3' to 5' end. Again, this is only to tell you the definitions. We are going to discuss these in a little more detail. So,
Ma'am, one more thing, like if we don't know the sequence, then what do we know about the genes? Like how do we know that is a gene there in the DNA in this region?
yes, I'll be explaining you in a second. You just have to wait. So in this case, exonucleases are the ones which cut from the end. So for example, it removes one nucleotide. Like if this is the sequence, it would remove this, and so on, right? So this is exonuclease. Now the question is, and both of these exonucleases as well as endonucleases are used in molecular biology. Now let us discuss more about restriction endonucleases. restriction endonuclease is the term restriction. So endonuclease, I hope it's clear to everyone.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now,
Yes, ma'am.
why the word restriction is used? The word restriction is given to them is because these enzymes are present in bacterial strains. Okay. These enzymes are present in bacterial strains, and naturally, right, naturally their role is to restrict the entry of foreign DNA. Following or no?
Yes, ma'am. Following.
So they restrict the entry of foreign DNA. So that is why the term restriction endonucleases is used. The way they restrict the entry is, what happens is that whenever a foreign DNA enters, whether it's a DNA from a virus or whether it's a bacterial DNA or any other naked DNA, whenever a DNA enters a bacterial cell, right? So if these enzymes are not there, then the bacterial cell would lose its identity, because every time a foreign DNA would enter, it can recombine and then the strain will get modified. The genomic DNA can keep getting modified every time you have a foreign DNA entering in the cell. But it is these restriction enzymes, what they do is that the moment a DNA is recognized as foreign DNA, the moment the restriction enzymes sense this, that okay, this is the foreign DNA, these enzymes, they get immediately activated and they chew up the DNA. So they break it into pieces and the DNA gets degraded. So that is their whole purpose. But then the point is, so their main function is to maintain the identity of the native organism, and they are present in bacteria. But then the question is how the bacterial cell, how its own DNA is not cleaved. So the question is why only only foreign DNA is cleaved and native DNA is not. Right, so foreign DNA, the bacterial cell, when the foreign DNA enters the bacterial cell, these enzymes immediately cleave the DNA and then the DNA will get degraded. But then why these enzymes, if they are present in the bacterial cell, right? The bacterial cell is producing these enzymes, so why they are not cleaving its own DNA?
Ma'am, because methylation could occur or some other process to protect the native DNA.
Right, so that is why this is called as restriction modification systems. They are also called as RM. What happens is that you have the native DNA. The native DNA is actually methylated by enzymes which are called methylases.
Ma'am, if you can also please explain like what happens in the case of genetic recombination in bacteria, like transposition and transduction and conjugation case.
Right, but then you need to wait, Ratnesh. We will be discussing that when we will be
Yes,
teaching.
ma'am.
It will be there when I will be teaching you conjugation, transformation, transduction.
So in their case, why is this restriction into nucleases keep them?
Hmm?
Don't disintegrate them. Why
Yes.
this? Yeah.
Right, so we'll be discussing that. So what happens is that the native DNA is methylated by the enzymes which are called methylases. The most common methylases, there are many methylases, but then these are the most common methylases. For example, DAM methylase and DCM methylase. So DAM methylase actually methylates the A nucleotide and DCM methylates the C nucleotide, right? So for example, it recognizes and it doesn't methylate every C. So for example, it recognizes CATG and it will methylate C. If this CATG is present in the form of CCC, G, then this C will not be methylated. You're getting my point? So this is called sequence specific methylation. So it's not going to methylate every C. It's going to methylate specific Cs. For example, first C in the sequence CATG, something like this. So that is why the specificity is there. Class? So that is, yes.
How is the specificity ensured?
The specificity is ensured because the way the enzymes recognize the sequence is they actually bind and then they swap the entire double-stranded DNA, and then the moment they find the recognition site, then only they bind and then they methylate. So that is how the specificity is ensured. So the moment the enzymes recognize the sequence, they will do the methylation. But otherwise, it is not like it will go and directly bind to CATG. It is never like that. It will bind anywhere in the DNA, but then it will move very fast. It will swap the entire double-stranded DNA, and the moment it recognizes that, it will stall there. I will show you a video for this in the next class.
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah. So these enzymes, they usually recognize double-stranded DNA. So with single-stranded DNA doesn't work. So double-stranded DNA, they would just move like, you imagine the enzymes are like hexamer and they surround the whole double-stranded DNA, and you imagine like a rope which is moving through a ring, and then this rope would move, and the moment it recognizes the specific sequence, the ring will stall there and it will do the action, something like this, right?
Yes, got it, ma'am.
Right. So then, so that is how the native DNA is not cleaved, because the foreign DNA, so the foreign DNA will have a different methylation pattern as compared to the native DNA. And to actually demonstrate this, an experiment was performed where in fact what they did was the viral DNA was used to infect an E. coli, and they called it as an E. coli A, right? Called it as an E. coli A, and this was infected with viral DNA. With this, for example, if the infection was efficient, then what the scientists did was they selected the same viral DNA, they isolated the viral DNA from E. coli A, and now tried to infect E. coli B, and this time there was, because in this case, even if it's E. coli, the methylation pattern can vary from strain to strain. So this is only to explain you that it is not genus or species specific. You can have methylation pattern different with respect to different strains. And it is this class, it is this methylation pattern and it is this restriction machinery which is actually responsible for, like Ratnesh was asking, the transformation, transduction, conjugation. So you will find that in the later classes when we will discuss, the transformation efficiency is very good in one strain, very poor in another strain, almost no in some strains. So what is the reason why a plasmid or a viral DNA cannot just go in every cell? No, it cannot go. It will go only and only in those cells where the methylation pattern is recognized. Otherwise, the restriction machinery of the host actually restricts the entry. So now the question is, when we talk about restriction enzymes class, these restriction enzymes, before I tell you the various classes of restriction enzymes are of 4 classes: restriction enzyme 1, 2, 3 and 4. And in type 2 restriction enzymes, there are multiple classes. We are going to discuss this. But then the question is, when we talk about these restriction endonucleases, let's discuss their nomenclature. So because restriction endonucleases, they are present in a bacterial cell, right? So therefore they are isolated from a bacterial cell. So therefore, they are named like this only, named after the bacterial strain from which they are isolated. So for example, if you have a strain E. coli, so the enzyme which is isolated is called EcoR1. So this is the enzyme restriction endonuclease which is isolated from the strain E. coli strain R1. So what you do is you use the first alphabet E and then you used the first two alphabets of the species CO, eco, and then R1 is the strain number, right? Likewise, the strain what should be the name of this enzyme?
SMA1. SMA1.
This time somebody else is going to try.
So now BAMH1, BAMH1.
Very good. My class will become an expert. Everybody is following class.
Yes, ma'am.
So this is how you
Yes,
name
ma'am.
the enzymes, right? So maybe if somebody else also wants to try, we can take one more example.
I'm HIN1.
Right. So most of the time what you do is you take the the two alphabets from this one, but many a times when there are multiple such very similar strains, then often you take the third alphabet as well. So in this case, for example, it will be HINF1, but otherwise even the first two alphabets are fine. So EcoR1, SMA1, BAMH1, HINF1, they are pronounced like this. Okay. Now let us see the recognition sequence. Talk about restriction enzymes, the ones which are commonly used, right? They belong to type 2 category, and then these are actually called as orthodox type 2 enzymes. And these enzymes, they actually produce two kinds of enzymes. Sticky ends. Sticky ends are also called as cohesive ends. Blunt ends are also called as flush ends. Okay, so for example, the enzyme SMA1, which we discussed in just now from Serratia marcescens, this recognizes the sequence, and this will be in the form of double-stranded DNA, right? So the sequence that it recognizes is this, and the cleavage site will be here. So as a result of cleavage class, the kind of ends that are produced, if you see it, they are flush ends. Is this making sense?
Yes, ma'am.
These ends are called flush ends, right? Or blunt ends because they are blunt. There is no nucleotide which is protruding.
Yes, ma'am.
Right? Now when we talk about sticky ends or protruding ends or cohesive ends, in this case the ends are actually, so for example, I will give you an example of one is isolated from E. coli. In this case, the sequence is GA, and this will be CD, AA, G. GAA TTC, GAA TTC. So I'll be discussing about what is a palindrome, what is a non-palindrome, how do we classify the restriction enzymes in the next class, but this is only to give you an overall idea about the terminology that we will be using. So in this case, the cleavage is between G and A, between G and A class. So the ends that are produced as a result of this will be, you have G and then you have C, T, T, A, A, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
And you have A, A, T, T, and here you have a G, correct? So these ends are called as sticky ends or protruding ends or cohesive ends for the simple reason that the ends are actually hanging out, right? So these are not
Yes, ma'am.
these are not blunt ends, these are not flash ends, these are protruding ends, these are sticky, so they are like hanging, so therefore the term that is used is called overhang. Right, so you can have, if the sequence is from 5' to 3' class, right, if the sequence is like this, so in this case what kind of overhang are we seeing?
Ma'am, 5'.
Yes, very good. So likewise, maybe just one more terminology before I explain you, before we go to the next, I mean the details of it. When we talk about class, the enzymes, so we discussed you can have what happens is that the restriction enzymes, when they recognize particularly orthodox type 2 enzymes, which are used in molecular cloning, which are used in gene cloning, they are called as orthodox type 2 enzymes. And these enzymes particularly, so there are other enzymes which do not recognize class palindromic sequences. So I thought I should explain you what is a palindrome. A palindrome is a sequence which reads the same in both ways, like radar. But in this case, when we say it reads the same in both ways, it is in the complementary sequence. For example, GAA-TTC. So this sequence, if you just write the complementary of this sequence, this is going to result in a palindrome. Class.
Yes, ma'am.
Question is, do you think that every sequence it is complementary will result in a palindrome? This is the question for your, this is your take home question. You're going to think about it and then we are going to resume the discussion on Monday's class or Tuesday's class, I'm sorry. So my question, the take home question is that whether every complementary sequence is a palindrome. You're going to think about it. So I gave you an example that GAA-TTC is a palindrome. So my question is, every complementary sequence would make a palindrome or it is not true? You're going to try it?
And ma'am, the GATTC, how can it, how is it like palindrome?
Right, so that is what I told you, because the DNA is read from 5' to 3' direction, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, so then, so always you are reading from 5 prime to 3 prime direction. So the palindrome is from 5 prime to 3 prime. So 5 prime to 3 prime, it is GAA TTC. And when you write the complementary sequence, or maybe should I write it one more time? Okay. So, and then this is 3 prime, right? And then this is 3 prime. And then this is 5 prime. So 5 prime to 3 prime GAA TTC. 5 prime to 3 prime in the lower sequence GAA TTC. Reads the same? Ratnesh.
Ma'am, but I didn't understand like what you're trying to say.
Huh? Not clear?
I didn't. Yes, ma'am, not clear.
So let me try explaining you one more time. Palindrome read the same. Hmm? So for example, 5 prime to 3 prime, it is GAA TTC, and then here also GAA TTC. So this sequence is a palindrome, right? So then the question is, so then my question is, do you think that every complementary DNA will be a palindrome? This is the question. So
Ma'am, but
so for this,
if the lower sequence,
right, so for this class, I can easily tell you the answer, but I want you to try. Just
Ma'am,
type
it's
in.
not right. Like, for example, you have
yes, ma'am,
GA,
it's
No, it
TTC.
is
not.
not. If we just take
It
GA,
is not a.
TTT, then it would be a palindrome.
Exactly. That is the point I'm trying to make. That not every sequence will be a palindrome. So orthodox type 2 enzymes, they recognize the palindrome, whereas there are other restriction enzymes. So the point I'm trying to make is that restriction enzymes can recognize palindromic as well as non-palindromic sequences, as well as interrupted palindromic sequences. But then the restriction endonucleases belonging to type 2 category, particularly orthodox type 2 category, are the ones which are used in gene cloning, and they are the ones which recognize usually palindromic sequences. But we are going to discuss in detail the other categories, type 1, type 3, type 4, etc. The recognition and cleavage site in case of orthodox type 2 enzymes is exactly same. So for example, it recognizes GAA-TTC, that is the recognition site and that is the cleavage site. It is same. So it will cleave between G and A. We are going to discuss in more detail, like you can have variants of these enzymes as well. Like there are other enzymes which recognize these the same GAA-TTC but do not cleave between G and A. They will cleave at somewhere else. So we are going to discuss these in more detail maybe in the later classes, but keep thinking about what we discussed in today's class, and then we will resume the discussion on Tuesday. I have to go for second